everywhere in the state of Florida that maybe the networks and some of the folks on TV called this election too quickly, and that as the numbers got closer and closer and it got down to 1,000 or 600 votes, that we needed to just step back a minute and to make sure that democracy was working correctly down in this country. And that's what was determination made, that we ought to just step back for a few minutes and make sure that all the voters in Florida were really counted.
What was the first reaction that Vice President Gore had after making the concession call when he heard that it was as close as it was in Florida? How did he respond to that?
Well, I can't answer that, but I can speak for all the folks here in Nashville tonight. We are here. We are pumped up. These people have worked their heart out to make sure that Al Gore is the next president of the United States, and we want to make sure that all those votes are counted, because at the end of the day, we know that when they're all counted, Al Gore will be president of the United States of America.
All right, thanks very much. Terry McAuliffe, who is in Nashville tonight, big fundraiser for Al Gore, and of course, great friend of President Clinton. He served in that role as well. Florida, I think it's fair to say, is still in play. It's just far too confusing. We're about to make an official call. It's just too confusing. Florida's been in play all night long. It has not been a sterling evening for vote projections in that state. Originally, NBC News and all the other networks projected that Al Gore would win Florida. Then at 2:18 this morning, we project. All right, we're officially saying that Florida is too close to call because of a recall. Campaign and voter counters are being called back to work to count absentee ballots. Will that be going on throughout the evening, so far as we know? Yes, it will be happening even as we speak. They're being called back tonight. So we take Florida away from George W. Bush. That means he is short of the 270 electoral votes that he needs to win. He was declared the president-elect by all of the networks, and there was great jubilation in Austin, Texas, and then total chaos once the numbers began to come together in Florida. The concession call was made by the Vice President of the United States. He called back about an hour later and said he'd like to withdraw that because it is so close. They want to make sure that the numbers are correct. The Secretary of State in Florida, a Republican woman by the name of Catherine Harris, has reported that the difference is only about 500 votes, although Jeb Bush now believes that they can pick up at least a couple of thousand votes, and he's probably talking about absentee ballots. In 27 precincts in Dade County, they're going to be recounting absentee ballots. Workers have been called back in to do that. Vice President Al Gore, who went to the War Memorial in Nashville to make a speech to his supporters, no doubt to thank them for his support and to say to the country that he could not have won and that he congratulated Governor Bush. He now has scrapped that speech. He's gone back to the hotel to see what the numbers finally say about this extraordinary and bizarre evening. It's worth reminding everyone that the decision has been made across the country. All the votes have been cast. No more will be added to the pile that's already being tabulated in Washington and Wisconsin and still in the state of Oregon. Florida remains the key. If, in fact, it goes back into the George Bush column at the end of all this long, confusing tabulation, he's the president-elect. If it goes to Al Gore still has to win Wisconsin or Oregon to be the new president of the United States. So this could not be closer.
Tom, actually, all Al Gore needs is Florida. All George Bush needs is Florida.
Oh, that's right. It's 249, right? It's down to Florida.
It's Gore 249,
right.
Bush 246 right now.
Right.
With Florida, Oregon, and Wisconsin outstanding. But Oregon and Wisconsin are only 18 electoral votes. Right. They need Florida. Florida, Florida, Florida. Let me show you one more time, Tom. This is it, right here. Florida, 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 Florida. It's that kind of night. Or morning.
It is indeed. Okay, we're going to go to the map, and we're going to show you Wisconsin, Oregon, and Florida, 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 down in the southeastern corner of the state. These are the tabulations, 249 for Al Gore, 246 for Bush, now that we have pulled back Florida. And that means that the state is still in play, that this presidency has not been resolved. The governor of the state the brother of the presidential candidate of the Republican Party, believes that they'll deliver the state to him. But this is what's going on in Oregon. George Bush is up in Oregon. He can't win with Oregon alone, as Tim has pointed out. He's up by 3 points. And let's take a look now at the state of Florida. 99% of the vote has been counted. This is the election service that we all use, the networks and reporters and so on. And as you can see, it's now down to 1,000 votes, almost 2,000, a little less than 2,000 between the two of them. So that's been narrowing and dropping as well. David Gregory in Austin?
Yeah, I just got off the phone with Karen Hughes in the governor's mansion. This is how chaotic the scene is. Governor Jeb Bush is now online. He's on the computer, contacting the computers of the Secretary of State's office in Florida, looking at the numbers. So they're trying to confirm this. One Florida official has been quoted as saying that the margin of victory is 1,210 votes. The governor's office here does not independently know that. The man who you'd think would be in a good position to know, who is Governor Jeb Bush, is now on the computer, looking at the numbers as they're coming in the Secretary of State's office. There's a lot that's going on, but I'm told that Governor W. Bush is not working the phones. It's all on Jeb right now, and this is just in complete flux. Nothing is going to happen until they figure it out, and they just are not in a position to do it.
Any less confident that she was in her last phone call with you?
No less confident, but certainly a little bit more in flux, I think.
All right, here's Bill Daley, who is the chairman of the Vice President's campaign. Let's hear what he has to say.
Let me say I've been in politics a very long time, but I don't think there's ever been a night like this one. Just an hour or so ago, the TV networks called this race for Governor Bush. It now appears that their call was premature. Let me be very clear about this. According to the information supplied by the Secretary of State of Florida, with 99.9% of the vote counted, there is a margin of only about 1,200 votes out of millions cast, with over 5,000 votes left to be counted. This is a very significant, for most important reason, and that is, for under Florida state law, this triggers an automatic recount, and as everyone knows in America, this race has come down to the state of Florida. Without being certain of the results in Florida, we simply cannot be certain of the results of this national election. Let me add that Vice President Gore and Senator Lieberman are fully prepared to concede and to support Governor Bush if and when he is officially elected president. But this race is simply too close to call. And until the recount is concluded and the results in Florida become official, our campaign continues. So let me thank all of you. Let me thank all of you on behalf of Vice President Al Gore and Senator Joe Lieberman for waiting out here so late tonight, and we hope to have you back very soon. Thank you very much. Good night.
Political lifetime, Bill Daley, the son of the legendary mayor of Chicago who was so pivotal in the election of John F. Kennedy in 1960, coming out tonight to say that they thought that they had lost the election to Governor George W. Bush. The networks had projected that Florida would go into the Bush column. Earlier, we had projected that it would go into the Gore column. In both cases, we have pulled back now. Florida is still too close to call. And that means that both men are shy of the 270 electoral votes that they need to win. It's all about Florida, Florida, Florida. The New York Post had to make a decision. It made this one. Could still be right, but it's a big roll of the dice at this hour because absentee ballots still have to be counted. And we heard from Austin, Texas, David Gregory saying that the governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, is on the internet trying to figure out just how much of a spread there is between his brother's vote total and the vice president's, Tim.
Tom, the 1,200 figure that Bill Daley used is the same figure that David Gregory reported earlier that Jeb Bush was using. So we had first been told 565 some votes. Now it appears to be around 1,200. At least both campaigns can agree on that. But for the chairman of the Gore campaign to stand before the nation at 4 a.m. and say, folks, this campaign is not over. We want to make sure that we really have lost. We will support Governor Bush if, in fact, that's the way it turns out. An automatic recount takes place in Florida now. How long that would take, we have no idea.
The other thing is we don't know why there has to be a recount of absentee ballots in 29 precincts. Have we gotten an explanation on that yet?
No, we have not. Whether they had not been counted originally or there was some sense that they had been miscounted. But with just 1,200 margin, the delicate balance that exists, as I was watching Chairman Daley, I thought it was a dream. You just can't believe all this is happening in election 2000. But it's here, and it's real.
Yep. It tells you how close this race has been. It's going to come right down to a almost zero-sum game, and it's very likely it's still not impossible that, in fact, Al Gore wins the national popular vote, because as we've been watching that gap has been closing steadily as well. Here it is once again, now up to 94%. And as you can see, 13,000 votes, Tim, between the two of them nationally, blows right through Kennedy and Nixon, which was 118,000 votes. Most of those votes are still coming in from the state of California, where Al Gore is 18% of California still to go, we're just now told. So Al Gore could end up with a popular vote victory of some significant proportions, by the way, if it's just 18,000 now and 18% still to go in California. So he could end up a point or two ahead of Governor Bush and then still lose the Electoral College to him. We've got one of our guys in place over here who's got his microphone on now, and this is Shelley Geweiser, who is one of our analysts who's been looking at these numbers all night long. We won't go through the long, sordid history of Florida tonight. What's going on down there, Shelley?
Well, what's happening is that there are discrepancies in the vote count.
Why?
Well, first of all, there always are some discrepancies in the vote count. We have small differences, 1%, 0.5% very often. Normally, they don't make a big difference. In this particular case, we're talking about a very, very small difference between two candidates. In addition, there's a lot of absentee votes that were supposed to be counted during the day in a number of precincts that have not been counted. The estimate from VNS is about 50,000 absentee votes that haven't been counted. So we have a number of discrepancies. We've got a number of votes that haven't been counted. And in any event, in Florida, unless it's going to be a victory of more than somewhere around 27,000, 28,000 votes, there'll be an automatic recount. Incidentally, it's not just Florida. We have the same circumstances in Iowa and Wisconsin, where we're talking about 1,000 or 2,000 vote differences.
But in Florida, at this hour, are absentee ballots being counted?
They've actually called back staff, is our understanding from the Associated Press, in several counties to go and count absentee ballots. It's not clear why those ballots were not counted earlier.
At one point, one of Governor Bush's men, Stu Stevens, was saying that there could be as many as 30,000 absentee ballots that have yet to be counted, a lot of them from military personnel and other people who live in Florida. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, they're talking to us actually about 50,000. So there is a significant number of absentee ballots that could be counted. It will probably provide, we would expect, George Bush with a little bit of a margin, but not enough to overcome the automatic recount at 27,500 or thereabouts.
When do we think that we'll have a completion of these absentee ballots being counted?
We really don't know. They should be completed. They were supposed to be completed today. I'd expect that we'd have some kind of a first count tomorrow. But, of course, if there's an automatic recount, we don't know how long that will take. And we may all be sitting here waiting for it.
Shelley, let's go back over some painful territory. We called Florida wrong the first time, we thought, at the time.
Correct.
How'd that happen?
There is a discrepancy in the Dade County sample compared to the Dade County, actually it's 3 counties, the Miami area, Dade County, Palm Beach County, and Broward County. There was a discrepancy between the sample that we use for our calls and the actual county vote that came in. Now, it turned out that the county vote that came in that made us change that call was not nearly as one-sided as it appeared to be, and in fact the sample wasn't that bad, but it was a much closer election than what we expected. When we got to the end of night, where essentially 98-point-something% of the votes were counted, and Bush showed that he had a lead of almost 60,000 votes, then we were able to declare him the winner, subject to a potential recount. The problem is that there were a number of additional votes that had not been included that were later included, and that's why it narrowed so significantly.
When do you think we'll know about Florida?
Boy, I don't know. I've heard estimates that in the past it's taken them 2 weeks to do a recount. I have a feeling they'll have a little bit more pressure this time than they usually have.
Do you have a good catering service number?
Well, it depends. Do I have to sit here for that period of time? That would be difficult.
All right. Thank you very much, Shelley Gaweiser. That's the situation in Florida. It could be earlier this morning. It could be later this morning. It could be by the end of the week. We don't know at this point.
The Electoral College votes in December.
Very heartening, everyone.
Well, Tom, the fact is, if in fact the initial recount shows a significant George Bush margin
He's the president
of 10,000 or 15,000, my sense is that Al Gore would step forward and concede.
Right.
He just wants an honest count.
But the question is, when do we get the honest count? That's the other thing, and that may not happen for 24 or 48 hours, right?
Absolutely.
Or if the initial recount, not the official recount, but the initial recount, is not in any way conclusive, then we may have to wait for the official recount before anyone makes a move, and we could be here for some time.
Well, in fact, it is president-elect. We still have an operating chief executive officer of the land. We still have a Congress that is in place. The machinery of America will go on. It's just that we've never been through anything quite like this before, and there will be a lot of anxiety out there. And of course, security is going to become a huge consideration. Who has charge of those ballot boxes? Who's in charge? Who's looking in when they're doing the recount? That's going to become critical to this process. We're going to share with you as much as we know as we go along through the night. Thank you very much, Shelley. We'll let you go back to your post now, and you're welcome back here anytime to explain to us what, in fact, is going on. Let's go to NBC's David Gregory now, still standing outside of the Bush headquarters in Austin, Texas, which has been through a night in which they thought Al Gore had won Florida. Then they believed that Florida had made George Bush the president-elect. Now Florida has been taken back from them, and they're in a state of suspended animation, David.
Absolutely, Tom. And now we're told that the chairman of the campaign, Don Evans, you know him well, a longtime friend of Governor George W. Bush, is now on his way to the microphones here to speak to what is a smaller crowd of supporters, no doubt a rebuttal to Chairman Daley over on the Gore campaign side, his comments that this is still too close to call. In the meantime, the key player here is Governor Jeb Bush, still inside the mansion here, just 2 minutes from where I'm standing, not working the phones, but working the computer on the website, actually corresponding and viewing the computers in the Secretary of State's office in Florida to look at the latest numbers. As you pointed out, there is some level of agreement, and that is that they believe the margin for, at this point, President-elect Bush is 1,210 votes. But is that enough to make it official? Clearly not. That's why it's been difficult to get them on the phone, and that's why Don Evans is on his way over here right now. Tom?
All right, thank you very much, NBC's David Gregory in Austin, Texas tonight. Let's go to Nashville now. NBC's Claire Shipman is there. Claire?
Well, Tom, things are winding down here. Essentially, after Bill Daley spoke, Al Gore and his motorcade, his entourage, headed back to the hotel. Most of the supporters are trickling out. Daley obviously telling them, we will let you know as soon as we have something to tell you, so it doesn't look as though they're going to be waiting around for the next couple of hours or as long as it takes, as you've been discussing, and we have no idea about that. But again, all of Gore's staff and political advisors are on the phone with their Florida people and the state Florida people, the Democrats there, trying to figure out whether there is a chance that this could ultimately be recounted and that there might be something favorable there for Al Gore. But what they're really after, they say, is just the knowledge that this result is accurate. Tom?
All right, thank you very much, NBC's Claire Shipman. We want to take you back now to the national poll once again to show you how close this is. You remember that John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon in modern times had the closest race, at about 118,000 votes separated them. Here we have more than 90 million votes that have been cast so far, 33,000 votes separating the two candidates. This is just astonishing. NBC's historical consultant is Doris Kearns-Goodwin. Doris, this one's in the record books.
Oh, there's no question it's mythic. But if it appears mythic to us, I keep going back to what must it be like for Mr. Bush and Mr. Gore. I mean, their lives are going to be changed by this. They may become president. They may make history. Here we are.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go to, is it Claire Roberts? Clay Roberts, who's the head of the Secretary of State's office, the voter section. Clay Roberts, can you tell us what is going on in the state of Florida at this hour?
We're waiting for the results to come in from Broward County. They had some absentee ballots that came in this afternoon late, and they had to verify that the absentee ballots were not ballots cast by voters that also appeared at the polls. So they checked that out, and then there was a precinct that they also were tabulating. The votes are in the tabulation machine right now, and they should report to this office in the next 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll post that on the internet.
And will that mean that you have finished counting all of the ballots in the state of Florida?
There are some counties, some small rural counties, that because of their particular voter systems, they have some absentee ballots that they have not counted that they will have to come in tomorrow morning and count. I don't know. This is a close election. I don't know if it's enough to make a significant difference or not, but we'll have to wait and see.
One of the Bush campaign advisors said on our air earlier that he thought that there were some 30,000 to 50,000 absentee ballots that still had to be counted tomorrow that came from military personnel and other people who have a residence in Florida but were out of the country. What do you know about those absentees?
I think that's too large a number. Under the federal laws.
Go ahead.
Okay, who am I talking to here?
This is Tom Brokaw.
Okay, yeah, Tom. I think that's too large a number because in Florida we mail out absentee ballots to military voters 35 days in advance. We have the vast majority of those back. However, under federal laws, they have an extra 10 days after our polls close, after yesterday, November 7th, to get those absentee ballots back into the supervisor of elections office. Those ballots have to be postmarked no later than Election Day, November 7th. In 1996, we call those the 10-day ballots. In 1996, we had 2,300 ballots come in after the polls closed that belonged to those military voters. So we've had more turnout this year, so you can expect that number to be up above 2,300, but it's not thousands and thousands, the number you hear.
And what about the report that we had that 27 precincts in Dade County would be recounted as absentee?
I don't have information on that.
The turnout in Florida, do you have a judgment on that tonight? Did it go well over 50%?
Let me call up a chart. The number we have is 67.2%.
Wow, that's huge.
Massive.
Yes, sir.
And the last number that we had on the difference separating the vice president and the governor was that the governor was ahead by about 600 votes, with 99.9% of the precincts tabulated so far in Florida, according to the Secretary of State's office. Does that match up with your numbers?
Our website right now, I think, is showing 1,210.
1,200 now.
Yes.
1,210, that's right. We went from about 600 to 1,210. Yes. And how many of those Broward County ballots will you be counting, do you think, altogether?
We don't know that number.
You don't know that number?
No.
Have any idea?
Well, Broward has that number, but they're busy counting and tabulating the ballots, and they're working hard to get a report into us as quickly as possible. So.
All right, Mr. Roberts, we're very appreciative. We're going to keep you either on the line with somebody in our control room or get your numbers so that we can get right to you. We'd like to just keep you open because the country, as you know, is awaiting what happens there in the state of Florida. But what it comes down to, let me just review this for our viewers. 1,210 votes now separate the two candidates. You have Broward County absentee ballots still to tabulate. They're being done right now. They're in the tabulation machines. We should know that in the next, 20 minutes or so, what the results are?
So.
Does that seem right?
That's what Broward's telling me.
Okay, and they are the only ones left out apart from those military absentee ballots that come in under the 10-day rule?
Yes, sir. Well, except for some of the small rural counties that have to count some absentee ballots tomorrow.
But as you know, with a race this close, with only 1,200 votes separating them, even in the rural counties, 50 or 60 here, 70 or 80 there could make a difference in this race, couldn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, Mr. Roberts, we'll wait to hear what you have to say about what happens in Broward County.
How long for official recount?
Yeah, the official recount, you'll do it after you have 0.5%. If there's only that difference, how long will that take?
The supervisors did the first count starting at 7 p.m. this evening and going to, it took quite a while, but to do a recount, we don't have the problem of the ballots having to travel from far-flung precincts. We could probably do it in a day, I think.
All right, Mr. Roberts, we're going to stay in touch with you and try to get back as soon as you can. Not just posting them on the website, but we'd love to be able to hear from you right here on NBC. We'll put you right on the air, okay?
The best place for the information is the website.
All right. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go right to the website when we can. We'll get that up and running. Let's go to Nashville, Tennessee now. Greg Simon, who was with the Vice President when he was making a couple of critical calls tonight.
Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Tell me, Greg, what was it like when the Vice President called the governor? Were you there when he called to take back the concession?
Yes, sir.
And how did that conversation go?
Well, it was what I would call a very factual conversation. The Vice President noted that he had called based on the networks declaring Florida in the Bush column, and that now, in the time it took him to get down to the War Memorial Plaza, that gap had narrowed from many thousands of votes to several hundreds of votes, with several thousand votes outstanding, and would trigger an automatic recount in Florida. And since there are nearly 6 million votes counted, and this is less than 1/10 of 1%, that if in fact Governor Bush won Florida, he would concede, but right now it was not at all clear that Governor Bush had won Florida, and in fact it's still not clear, and it can't be clear until after the recount.
Mr. Simon, if in fact after the recount tonight of these Broward counter ballots, that we're still within the technical definition of an automatic recount in Florida, say that George Bush ends up earlier this morning, 1,500 votes ahead of George Bush ends up 1,500 votes ahead of you all. Will you stand back and have Florida do the automatic recall, or will you step in and say this should be over?
I can't answer a hypothetical question like that. That wouldn't be my decision to make. I know that in Florida, a recount is a matter of law automatically, and the citizens of Florida are owed the opportunity to make sure that their voice is heard.
Mr. Simon, we're going to go now to Austin because we want to hear from Don Evans, who is George Bush's friend and campaign chairman.
We hope and believe we have elected the next president of the United States. The latest vote count in the state of Florida shows Governor Bush winning that state by more than 1,200 votes. They're still counting, and I'm confident when it's all said and done, we will prevail. Thank you again for all your hard work and all of your efforts, and we look forward to a great celebration. God bless.
Don Evans tonight, tit for tat. We heard from Bill Daley earlier saying that this campaign is not over, and Don Evans coming out saying we believe that we're going to prevail in the state of Florida, that we have elected the next president of the United States, the 43rd president. He is the governor of the state of Texas. Don Evans' very good friend George W. Bush. They met first when they were in Midland, and in fact it was the Evans family that introduced George W. Bush to his wife Laura. We're going to I've got Jonathan Alter here with us now at the same time. Tim Russert on my right and Jonathan Alter over on my left, and we're going to take you through the popular vote nationally at the moment, Jonathan, to show you how close this is. We're now up to 95% in, and as you can see, it's 19,000 votes separating them. We went quickly through the 118,000 vote margin that separated John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. It's been right about in this margin for some time, and still more votes to come in from California, where, of course, Al Gore is expected to run ahead of George Bush. So it remains not just possible, but it looks probable that Al Gore could win the popular vote yet and still lose the electoral vote.
That's why I believe he will be elected president. Let me just try to explain this novel theory as to why. The state to watch now is California. If it turns out that Al Gore wins the popular vote nationally, there will be intense pressure in this country to have him become the president. Most people think the guy with the most votes wins. Recounts are as much an art as a science. You have experts, consultants who go around the country doing recounts. If the recount came out on behalf of Bush and Bush had lost the popular vote nationally, they would go to court, there'd be another recount, it would become endless, and the political pressure would mount very quickly to certify Al Gore as the winner, especially since you have a potential conflict of interest here with the governor of the state that is handling the recount being the brother of Governor Bush.
Well, let's bring Tim and Doris Kearns-Goodwin in. I mean, this has been raised with both campaigns. They both said that they knew the rules going in to this campaign.
Yeah, I don't know a constitutional expert who would agree with that, Tom.
Yeah.
Everyone has said straight out, whoever wins 270 votes in Electoral College is the next president of the United States.
It seems to me that the challenge itself, Jonathan, would throw that into great chaos, more than any recount or anything else, that if you had a clear-cut constitutional rule that everyone understood when they began the campaign, and there was great discussion about it in the closing days of this campaign, that Al Gore would be seen as a big spoil sport of some kind and a guy who got in the way of history, that the time to change it would be after the election.
I'm not talking about changing the rules or having the popular vote somehow supersede the electoral vote. I'm talking about as a practical political matter. If the recounts could be assured to be totally accurate, and if everybody agreed on the recounts, then there wouldn't be this problem. But that's not the way recounts work. If you look at the history of close recounts in congressional races, they're always disputed. You go precinct by precinct, and then people say, this recount wasn't fair, we have to do it again. And the result, after weeks, would be a lot of pressure to say, instead of trying to sort out who really won Florida, let's end this thing.
Doris Kearns-Goodwin, what do you think?
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, I think the one prediction one can make after this mess, if it does turn out that Al Gore wins the popular vote but loses the electoral vote, is that electoral college thing is going to be looked at really carefully. I mean, it happened in '68 and it happened in '76 after those close races. There were all sorts of reform proposals. I think 700 went to Congress. But then once the crisis is passed, that energy usually dissipates and they forget about it. I'm now thinking about the electoral college like an appendix. It's a vestigial organ. It has no function anymore, and we've really got to figure out how to make it better. Maybe proportional voting in those states, maybe getting rid of it altogether. But it will be a nightmare for the country if Al Gore wins the popular vote, doesn't win. But Tim is right. That's the Constitution now. That's the future we're talking about. Right now, it would still mean if Bush wins the electoral vote, he is the next president.
But Doris, just to play this out for 1 minute, if you're talking about margins of a few hundred votes and you have disputes in several counties, we've already talked about Palm Beach County having a dispute with over a couple thousand votes of people who mistakenly voted for Buchanan when they intended to vote for Gore. Already this afternoon, they started a county investigation of these irregularities. And then you get a series of other irregularities all over the state of Florida. Pretty soon, nobody can figure out who really won. What happens then?
But there's going to be a factual answer to your question. I mean, I think what you're suggesting is there's some overarching intelligence who will say we have to somehow fix this in a little way to make it right that the person who won the popular vote wins the electoral vote by fixing it in Florida.
All right, I'm going to ask you both to hold. I'm going to ask you both to hold for a moment because we have on the phone now Bob Butterworth, who is the Attorney General of the state of Florida. He is a Democrat. He does believe, as I gather, that Al Gore still will prevail tonight. But let's go to this whole question about how much we can trust a recount process in the state of Florida, Mr. Attorney General.
Well, thank you, sir. The law in the state of Florida is if, in fact, a candidate comes within 0.5% of another candidate, there's an automatic recount. At this point in time, there are still a number of a few thousand votes out there. So at this point in time, we do not know whether or not it is Al Gore or George W. Bush who is winning the vote in Florida. So, but no matter which one wins, there'll be an automatic recount. It's done very, very quickly. Everything is done by machine voting, and we done within a matter of hours, probably tomorrow.
Who supervises that?
That's done by the supervisors of elections in each of our 67 counties, and of course there'll be poll watchers on both sides. I can't recall the exact number of precincts in Florida, but it's probably a little bit over 9,000 or 10,000. And here we're talking about right now maybe 500 votes difference. And the latest vote I just got here now from one of our supervisors that we may very well be talking only about 200 votes difference totally in the state of Florida and 10,000 precincts. So a recount will only take a short period of time, be done tomorrow. Of course, if there are any challenges by either side, that will be done in the courts, and that just whatever happens, happens. But a recount will occur, and then after the recount, as what happens many times, the candidates just then decide what they want to do after that on their own.
But the bottom line, as a Democrat, as a supporter of Al Gore, if you come up short tonight, say 1,000 votes, 1,200 votes, there is an automatic recount, you would have confidence in the recount.
I believe there should be a recount. There should be at least one recount. We've had a number of local elections where there have been a couple recounts, and then one of the candidates would just end up conceding it. But I do believe if you're coming within a couple hundred votes, we're not only talking about the vote of a local official or the vote of or the votes that may decide the next governor of the state. We're deciding the votes that may decide the next presidency of the United States. So therefore, I believe that this state, this country, and this world must make sure that the Florida vote count is accurate and is correct.
Mr. Butterworth, Jonathan reported earlier that there were some irregularities in the Palm Beach area with elderly voters who thought they were voting for Al Gore when in fact they pulled the lever for Pat Buchanan because of what, faulty instruction?
Because of the way the punch ballot worked. They went down and thought that they were punching out for Gore, and actually they were punching out for Buchanan. And starting pretty early in the day, there were a lot of calls to the Palm Beach Post, a lot of reports of irregularities, and county officials came in to investigate sometime this afternoon.
Have you had any reports of irregularities to your office, that one included, or others?
Yes, sir, I have, but that's a different issue than a recount. When it's within half a point, that's a recount. The type of ballot that was in there in Palm Beach, I see as very highly unusual, but that's a separate and distinct issue than the issue of the whether or not someone won within a half of 1%.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Bob Butterworth. We'll stay in touch with you throughout this very long evening as we try to get things sorted out. Okay, here we are in Florida now. We're now showing 100% in. This is the voter election service, the one that we use. This is not the Secretary of State's, right? Separated by 200 votes, as you can see. Actually,
224.
Yep, 224 votes altogether. And this is not the Secretary of State's office. This is what we've been using, and this one has been skewing much more to George Bush. It's dropped steadily from thousands of votes difference down to a couple of hundred now. David Gregory, what has Jeb Bush been able to find out as he works the internet?
Well, apparently not enough to conclude that they're going to get some sort of definitive answer between now and daybreak here or where you are. We're learning from the governor's mansion, from aides to the governor, that in fact Governor Bush is scheduled tomorrow. He had a press conference that was scheduled at 10:30 in the morning Central Time and other public events. It's all been canceled. And I just spoke to an aide who said, look, I don't know what to tell you. We're just essentially closing down for the night. There are people who are going home beyond the particulars, like the family members, including Jeb Bush. They just don't think they're going to be able to learn anything if they're in the middle of a recount. Everybody seems to be at wit's end at the moment within the mansion. They just seem to be hitting a wall in terms of information. They understand there's quite a bit of demand to find out which way this is all going to go, but they don't seem to have the answers right now.
David, take a look at this. In the national poll, we now show Gore ahead of George W. Bush by 60,000 votes. So it is increasingly likely that the vice president is going to win the popular vote in this country, and the Electoral College remains in abeyance. We don't know who is going to win that as long as Florida is out. So let me just be clear. Even if we get those Broward County recounts tonight, the Bush people believe that tomorrow's automatic recount will take the day, and so they're kind of closing up for the night, and they're going to wait to see what happens after the recount. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly the information that I'm getting right now. Right now, they're clearing the decks in terms of a public schedule. They simply don't know anything, and they are hunkered down. I'm sure they're looking at the same information that we have, and there's nothing that they can add to that as of just a minute ago.
Well, that's a major acknowledgement on their part, Tim Russert, that they're not going to win it tonight, that it's going to have to go to the automatic recall, that Jeb Bush couldn't come up with the votes that was going to get him over the top without an automatic recall. The Gore people are obviously hanging in at this point. You heard, however, the Attorney General, who is a Democrat and thinks that Gore will prevail, he has confidence in the automatic recall.
But he said at least one recount. Did you hear that sentence? In other words, he reserved the right to go to court. I do not think that this presidential election will be determined by some judge in Florida. That's just not going to wash. When we get into the litigation on this thing, it's going to get very, very dicey very fast.
So, Jonathan, let me just take you through this. If you think at the end of the recall that that Governor George W. Bush is ahead by 1,500 votes,
the Democrats go right into court.
And
they'll try to get another recount, and they'll start canvassing by precinct and county, and they'll challenge the whole recount process, and pretty soon you're into litigation land, and the American people will be saying, hey, wait a minute, Al Gore won this election. What is all this about?
All right, well, he's building a foundation in the popular vote, Jonathan, for your theory, which I still don't buy into, by the way, but we'll see what happens.
But, Tom, we actually asked this question in our NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. If, in fact, one candidate won the popular vote, another one electoral college, the American people, 57% said the winner of the popular vote should be the president. Right. 33 said no. But the pressure also builds.
Well, you talk about it, Tim. We just want to show the national vote just to show you what's happening there. Now, Al Gore has moved in front with 95% of the vote in so far. As you can see, he now has a lead of about 53,000 votes altogether. So he is beginning to open the lead a little bit in the national vote, especially because, as we remind everyone, most of the vote that is still being counted is in his best state, which is the state of California. Still 10% to go in California. That's a lot of votes.
I think after a recount in Florida, no matter what happens, there'll be a lot of pressure on the losing candidate to come forward and try to bring closure to this, just as there was on Richard Nixon in 1960, although he didn't win the popular vote.
Yeah.
The Austin American Statesman paper in Austin, Tom, had a headline all prepared called "It's Bush." It's now been changed to "History on Hold."
Pretty good line,
Pretty
actually.
appropriate. And someone else also provided me a little quote from Winston Churchill, which I thought you'd find topical. Politics are almost as exciting as war and quite as dangerous. In war, you can only be killed once, but in politics, many times.
Yeah, well, that's what's happened tonight to both these candidates. They both lived and died by Florida, and at the end of the evening, we left them both in purgatory, it turns out. They were not able to go either way. We had to pull back Florida from both of them.
We'll get to the promised land, Brother John.
I know, but the votes have been counted, and it's not up to the networks to get them there. The networks tonight, I think that it's fair to say, I think I indicated earlier we don't just have egg in our face, we've got omelet all over our suits at this point, and on our face and everywhere else, because we awarded Florida erroneously at one point, came back and managed to make everything equal by awarding it erroneously a second time.
If you just stayed with these simple boards, you wouldn't have those problems, those highfalutin computers, Tom. This is the answer. Get it right.
Well, that's right. We're trying to. It just takes a while. It does come down to Florida, but we're not able to say where Florida is going to be. So that's where we stand at this hour. We're told that in Nashville, they're beginning to recede from the war memorial after Bill Daley's speech there. In Texas, they're doing the same thing. The Bush people have canceled their planned news conference for tomorrow, their luncheon. Everything is on hold until Florida is resolved. We're going to go to Doris Kearns-Goodwin now. Doris, how about the country and its ability to handle all of this?
Well, I think it's going to be really hard if the popular vote does stay with Gore. We're a very different country than we were when the framers created the Electoral College. I mean, think of it back then. Only property-owning men could vote. Women weren't voting. Blacks weren't voting. If you were a renter, if you didn't pay taxes, you couldn't vote. Now everybody feels that they have a right to have one person having one vote and having it counted. So that ideal of democracy is much more deeply embedded in our system. And there's nothing I suspect we can do about it, except that I think it's going to leave a really bad feeling in people's minds if that split occurs. It's the nightmare. I've said all along it's what history may want, but it's not what the citizens right now should want.
Well, that may be the case, but it is the Constitution of the United States. It could not be spelled out more clearly. And certainly these veterans of these two presidential campaigns knew that going in, and we raised the possibility that it would go the other way, John.
But we didn't raise the possibility of a disputed outcome in a particular state. In other words, we raised the possibility that one person would win the popular vote, another the Electoral College by comfortable margins, or at least not disputed margins. This contingency was not raised and not stipulated to by the candidates, where you had a disputed outcome in a particular state.
But in all elections, candidates do, in fact, agree to resolve any kind of differences by the law, which is called a recount. And that's very, very important. Don't forget, if in fact these candidates didn't play by the rules of Electoral College, they would have spent a lot more time in California, a lot more time in New York than they certainly did.
Yeah.
You can't change the rules just because people don't like the outcome, whether it's resolved by a court of law or a board of elections or whatever.
Well, how do you resolve it, Tim?
Well, one thing I want to say just quickly before I show you these things, I think it's going to have to be resolved more quickly than going through a whole long process. I don't think the country will tolerate that one way or the other, that they're going to have to get this thing and work it out. But let us show you, it's not just Florida we're talking about. Look at what's going on in Wisconsin, for example. Look at how close it is in the state of Wisconsin. 233 votes separating them in Wisconsin out of 1.5 million that have been cast.
Unbelievable.
2.5 million.
2.5 million. Now look at Florida. 224 votes that are separating them. And in that case, we're talking about almost 6 million votes.
When it's this close in a Senate race, what they do is they take it to the Senate, and the Senate body votes. John Durkin and Bob Wyman in New Hampshire some years ago had their race resolved in the U.S. Senate, but there's no place to take this one.
Yeah, we're going to go back to that national vote again. The one thing I'm reasonably sure of after tonight is that I don't think that they're going to take it to the networks. That's the one thing I don't think that they're going to do. 95% of the national vote is in. Take a look at this. Al Gore is now up. The lead is more than 50,000 votes, and it's been steadily climbing in small numbers, but it's been going up. And still, as we say, the California vote is to come in. And in that case, we're talking about 95 million voters. And Al Gore has got a lead of about 50,000 votes.
Let's say he opens up a 400,000 vote lead with that last 5%. Does that increase the political pressure then on Governor Bush?
Absolutely. It all increases the political pressure on Governor Bush. But what I'm saying is that if we are a nation of laws, those were the laws. We talked about this. That wasn't the first time that this has been raised. We didn't wake up on election morning and say, the Electoral College, I forgot about that. It's been there from the very beginning.
And when people look at that map, some will suggest, my God, Governor Bush won 30 states. Al Gore only won 19 or 20.
Right.
Why shouldn't that figure into the calculation?
We've spent the last 10 days talking about where they've been going just because of the Electoral College.
I think the tricky thing is when a court gets involved. If you have some local judge in Florida who is going to determine the entire presidential election based on his analysis of the recount, that's where a lot of folks are going to get off the bus on this Electoral College business.
Well, my guess is that they ought to expedite the whole thing into the federal court system and maybe even run it all the way up to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible, and do it swiftly in the interest of getting this thing resolved. Both sides ought to agree to some kind of a path that they would be happy to have it resolved with, and then go from there. And then what I am quite confident of, this is the last we'll hear of the Electoral College. After this election, my guess is that it's going to be yanked out of there. Nobody wants to go through this again.
It will take a constitutional amendment.
I know, but I think that the country is going to get sufficiently aroused by this. You know, we're in a whole new political climate, obviously.
Maybe we should have one more political debate. One more presidential debate.
Right. Let's just start all over again. Okay, David Gregory, what do you have for us?
Well, Tom, probably the most ironic comment of the evening was the man who got onto the podium here about 15 minutes ago and thanked the remaining people who were waiting outside here for coming. He said, that concludes our program for this evening. We all know differently that this all goes on. All I can tell you at this point is that the flow of information coming out of the governor's mansion has slowed to an absolute halt. And at the moment, they are hunkered down. They know there's a recount. They don't believe that they're going to know anything. And what backs that up at the moment is that they have canceled the governor's public schedule for tomorrow. There was that press conference that was scheduled at 10:30 Central Time. There was a luncheon. All of that now scrapped. They are waiting to find out whether or not there is a definitive lead that Governor Bush can carry to a definitive victory in Florida. And it bears restating, just because the imagery is so powerful, the governor of Florida is here. He is in the governor's mansion. And for all we know, because we knew it earlier, he was working not the phones, he was working the computer. He was actually logged in, monitoring all of the election results on the website for the Secretary of State's office in Florida. So they were literally going vote by vote. You heard the chairman of the Bush campaign, Don Evans, come out a while ago and say, look, it's 1,200 votes. We think that's the margin. We think it's going to hold. But as you have been discussing, Tom, there are other votes to be counted, and now we're into the recount scenario. So everybody just waits. And again, it's also worth recalling who's there. President Bush, Barbara Bush, in addition to their sons, the governor of Florida, the governor of Texas, one waiting to find out if he's really the next president of the United States, the other one waiting to find out if he's delivering the state that'll make it happen. Tom?
Thank you very much, David Gregory. Jonathan, I hesitate to add to your arsenal, but you know, the fact is that it is hard for a presidential candidate to win the Electoral College and then lose the popular vote and go to the American people and say the people have spoken.
Well, especially since the people who are handling this recount work for his brother.
Right.
They owe their jobs on some level to his brother. It gets very complicated. You know, Democrats
well, wait a minute.
are going to be
Do we know that
about
for sure? I mean, this is done. This is done county by county. These are workers that are hired county by county.
Okay.
They're not beholden to Jeb Bush.
Not all of them.
And these are professional vote counters.
You're correct. I don't want to cast any aspersions on the professionalism of any of these folks. But you have an awful lot of people up and down the organization here. And again, I'm not accusing anybody of a conflict of interest. I'm not saying anybody's been compromised by this, but you know what the Democrats are going to say.
Yeah,
He's the governor of the state.
I'm just being told that almost every county elects a supervisor of elections. You heard the Attorney General say that he thought, I know that you had the caveat of one recount here, but that they do have professional people who are doing that, even as cocked up as it appears to have been in some counties.
You might have put some of the judges who would hear this case, too.
They're now saying 1,210 vote difference on the website, but it does appear that in the popular vote that Al Gore is widening his lead over the Texas governor. That is going to give everyone, as we say, a dilemma tomorrow. But I come back to my original point. This was not a surprise, everybody. We've had the Electoral College from the beginning. We talked about it a lot. That's why we had the kind of electoral map that we did tonight. That's why they campaigned where they did. And when they did.
You know, the election of 1824, the last time that a president was elected, who was the son of a former president, John Quincy Adams. He lost the popular vote. I'm sure Doris has probably gone over this some, but they spent the next 4 years fighting over it because Andrew Jackson had won the popular vote, and it crippled his presidency as they just argued and got nothing done for 4 years.
Well, that probably has not changed in American politics, and certainly that has been the case in the last 3 or 4 years in Washington, D.C. as it is. Fred Thompson was saying tonight, look, we've had divided government now. Doris Kearns Goodwin, going back to that election that Jonathan was just talking about, with John Quincy Adams getting the House of Representatives to put him into the presidency, what would you foresee, in fact, if we had a considerable popular vote victory for Al Gore, but George Bush pulled out an electoral college victory?
Well, I think then we have to think of it as if somehow there's going to be almost like a coalition government. If George Bush is smart, what he will do, if this were a parliamentary system and you had this close a division, you'd have a coalition government. What the counterpart in our democratic system would be putting a lot of Democrats into his cabinet. That's not an impossible situation if it goes along with his, I'm going to bring people together, and it may be necessary to reassure the country. You know, it's interesting, when Lincoln won, he put his 3 chief rivals into his cabinet because he knew the country was on the verge of such chaos. Even though it meant great infighting, it was a brilliant decision on his part. They were all better known than him, better educated. They all thought they should have been president. But he knew if he could somehow get agreement amongst all of them, he could run the country. And it may put a lot of pressure on Bush, and positive pressure, to bring a real coalition cabinet in and not just a bunch of Republicans who will not feel they've won in a very popular way.
I must say we would have to have the most grown-up attitudes and some common ground between the two campaigns as well to work out how they are going to get this resolved so they can do it as swiftly as possible. You don't want the country to go through the enormous period of distraction. Financial markets and our adversaries abroad will think that we're distracted by all of this. A lot of legislation will be put on hold. The country will be in a foul mood because it will be pitted one against the other. So I think that they're going to have to work out a swift resolution, however this turns out, both with the Jonathan's favorite subject of the evening, the voter recount in Florida, but also what we're going to do about popular vote versus electoral vote and how to get to a quick resolution. Plainly, we're not doing that here tonight. Okay, the popular vote continues to widen on behalf of Al Gore. However this turns out, it does appear that at the end of the evening that he'll be able to turn to Tipper and say, I was the choice of more people than Texas Governor George W. Bush. 174,000 now is the lead that he has over the Texas governor. 4 days ago, who would have thought that Al Gore was going to have that kind of a lead, and growing, because California continues to tabulate its vote. California apparently came in very substantially for Al Gore, despite an enormous effort, a lot of money spent, a lot of visits by George W. Bush, relatively speaking, and a very sophisticated Republican organization in California, Tim.
And he still, Al Gore, may overcome the obstacles in Florida and win electoral votes there. We just don't know, Tom.
Right.
Walter Dellinger, who I talked about earlier, who worked in the Justice Department, professor of law at Duke University, distributed a piece to the media on Monday, and it's eerie how prescient it was, Tom. As America goes to the polls today in a very close election, there's a possibility that either candidate may obtain a majority of electoral votes while receiving fewer popular votes nationwide than his opponent. Contrary to some alarmist statements in the press, this should not be an occasion for concern. Both major candidates have understood that we choose our presidents by electoral votes, not by national popular votes, and have for months campaigned accordingly. Nothing that happens in the popular vote should cast any doubt on the legitimacy of a president elected as the Constitution provides by a majority of the electoral votes. This was a Clinton administration and high-ranking Attorney General's office, very distinguished professor of law. Those are his views. It'll be interesting to see who'll be reading them back.
Nice professorial sentiments, and I'm sure a lot of reasonable people can agree on them, but you are in a great position, Tim, to assess the real-world politics of this and how it would actually come down, not in the classroom, but in the real world of competing political forces, a couple days from now when this thing seems to be dragging out. What happens then?
Well, we'll see what the election officials in Florida do and abide by that decision.
Yeah, and they are more neutral than you may be giving them credit for. They are elected officials, and they do have the tabulation machines, the Attorney General said. So we may get a clean win or a loss for George Bush or for Al Gore.
We may, but remember what Attorney General Butterworth said. The first of recounts, he reserved the right to apply for another recount.
Right. We did hear that.
Yeah, okay.
You and I are not going to resolve it here tonight.
Yeah.
No more than Tim and I resolved what happened to Florida. Where it ended up in the win-loss column. No. By the way, James Rogan, who was one of the pit bulls and a very effective adversary of Bill Clinton in the impeachment process, he was at risk for his California congressional seat. In fact, he lost it. So the Democrats picked up that congressional seat tonight. A lot of money poured into that seat. But the model for the House of Representatives is going to stay roughly what it was. We still have not worked out what's going to happen in the United States Senate, I think. This has been one long, bizarre, exciting, frustrating, anxious-driven night of American presidential politics. It is not over, ladies and gentlemen, because there is the popular vote, the President of the United States, and it's now up to 244,000 votes. And we want to tell you that in Michigan, in the Senate race, Debbie Stabenow, 49% of the vote against Spencer Abraham, who was a Republican incumbent. They got 37,000 votes separating them. Debbie Stabenow would be a Democratic pickup of a Senate seat in the United States Senate from Michigan. Okay, your local news will be next in many areas. We also want to remind you MSNBC will have continuing coverage in just 2 hours at 7 o'clock. Katie and Matt will be on with the Today Show. Surprise, Tim and I will be there with coffee and bagels, getting ready to serve them breakfast to welcome them to their place, because we know that they just can't get along without us on this morning.
And we'll put it all in perspective for them, Tom.
Well, indeed. We'll award Florida to one or the other. Who knows? Jonathan, thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank all of you for this long evening. It's going to be a long day ahead.